Okay. Looks like we're going live. Always got to have that, however long that lag is between the commercials and the connection and the whatnot. Okay, good. I want to make sure this other window is silent. So I'm getting to where I'm going to start keeping the second window open of my live show so I can check in there. So, hello everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Thanks for coming in to my second Sunday live. So, I'm really kind of liking this format. I think this is going to work really good for me in several ways because instead of doing one, hour and a half to 2 hour long show, I can do a couple of shorter shows and that gives my vocal cords a break because they've just been so much more rough lately and I'm not really sure why because I don't think I've been using them more than usual. But yeah, I don't know. It's been rough. I don't know. Sometimes I kind of wonder if the wood heat and the smoke and stuff doesn't kind of irritate those nodules a little bit and make everything a little bit worse. And now we'll be getting into spring and the pollen's flying and all the whatnots. All the whatnots in the air. So yeah, I think I'm liking this. And on top of that, like some people like Deb, she can be here for the later time, or some people like maybe Trina or somebody else can be here for the earlier time. And so that way I can break it up. So I'm going to keep working with how I'm going to break it up, but the more I do this, the more ideas I get. So what I was doing was kind of having a time where I'd start this show where we'd chat about this, that, and something else, answer a few questions, share a little bit of whatever. But if I can make the second show about the main topic and then the first show on the other channel, that can kind of help get people over here about, maybe answering a few questions, maybe going on a rant like I did earlier. That wasn't my plan, but hey, if it happens, it happens. And, I may or may not be able to blame you guys for the rants. We'll see. I can't remember what set me off into that rant earlier, if it was somebody in the chat or if it was just my own random thoughts. So, yes, happy Sunday to everyone and thanks for coming in. And by the way, you like me. You really like me. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm done being a goof for the moment, for at least a few seconds. So I'm still working on getting a few props here and there that don't cost me much. Cause you can tell this thing is teeny, but it's still cute and funny. So just to add some humor and fun stuff, you know? So yeah, now that it is actually time and people are filtering in a little bit at a time, I can get into the topic today of sneaky little ways that you can add more nutrition to your meals, whether it be it's just you and your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, and somebody doesn't like something, but you should eat it or consume it. There are ways that you can make it work. I want to bring up the fact that so last week I was talking about grains and I really didn't like wheat bread. Mom was always buying wheat bread all the time, wheat bread, because it was the healthier choice. Mom liked wheat bread. I hated it. But here's the thing about me I really wanted to like it. I wanted to like the things that were healthier for me. I wanted to like the wheat bread instead of the Wonder Bread, that garbage. Unfortunately, I preferred Wonder Bread, and I hated that about myself. I wished I liked the healthier stuff. And I was grateful once I got into milling grains and all that and was starting to learn about grains when I finally learned about white wheat, not white flour that's been stripped of everything, but white wheat, a whole grain, and realized I really like it. And barley, it's these are things that are nutrient dense but don't have that taste of the red wheat. So all this time, it wasn't really that I didn't like wheat bread. It was that I didn't like that type of wheat bread. So sometimes it's a matter of just trying something different. There are some wheat breads that you can get that I think use red wheat, like Dave's Killer Bread and whatnot. And I bought that a few times just because Misfits Market had it and I wanted to try it. And it's organic and they have a lot of seeds and stuff. And I like those. But, it can be expensive and I prefer to just make my own anyway. But the thing is, sometimes it is about just finding out for you, your family, your spouse, if maybe there's a different variety that a person may prefer where they can still get all those good nutrients. So, see, in the 70s, I got a bread machine and love whole grain bread because of it. That's interesting. I didn't know they had bread machines in the 70s. I didn't know they had them in the 80s. I mean, I started making my own homemade yeast breads by hand when I was like 15 or 16. And I taught myself. And I didn't know anything about bread machines until the 90s, and I kept thinking, "Why would anybody want a bread machine?" I never could understand it. I mean, I think I get it now, but, the my sister ended up getting a bread machine, and she really liked hers, but I don't know if she still has it. But I know, it wasn't that long later that you start seeing bread machines at every single garage sale. And it's like, did people decide it was too much work having the bread machine because it's a lot to clean? And so it didn't end up being that much more work than just making it by hand? I don't know. But I know I was given a pasta machine and I liked it for a while, but then I realized that I didn't need all that fancy stuff. I could just make pasta and actually have a little bit less of a mess to clean up and have it not take any longer. Dave, uh, Dave's Killer Bread, because he was a convict. I think he was convicted of murder, and maybe that's why it's called that. But he turned his life around, from what I understand. From what I don't know the whole story. I haven't read it, but at any rate, I love making bread by hand. Though I do have a recipe that I've never shared. Well, it's not really my own recipe. I got it from somewhere else, but I always take recipes and tweak them a bit. And I was doing this for a while. If you want a quick yeast bread, just a quick bread that doesn't require any kneading, yeah, you can you just mix your ingredients together in a bowl and you end up with it's got instead of having a more smooth top to it, it's kind of got this rustic sort of crusty looking top. I mean, it's good. It's really good, but it's a very soft dough, so you can't use something like that easily for making cinnamon rolls and whatnot. That's something you got to knead if you're wanting to make shapes. Something I haven't made in a long time are homemade pretzels, but you got to shape them. You got to have a nice smooth dough. But one of these days, I'm going to make homemade pretzels again. The main difference with those is you're making your bread and then you make your pretzels, you shape them, and then you boil them for a little bit, and then you bake them. That's what gives them that little bit different texture on the outside is the boiling. So, bought a new one. Really? That's interesting. I actually thought bread machines had kind of got out of style because I kept seeing them at garage sales over and over. So I'm kind of off topic, but at any rate, I'm happy to do it by hand. But whatever works for each person. If having a bread machine does make it a lot easier for you so that you can have homemade bread, then yes, great option. So anyway, the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to sneaking in when it comes to sneaking nutrition into your various foods is my mixed greens. Okay. This is actually from 2018 because in 2018, I did so much jars of this. Not really, really. What I was doing at the time was dehydrating the various different things. Then at the end of the season, took everything and mixed it together. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize how much I had. So I filled so many jars that I didn't do any more blend after 2018 because it's like I got to work through what I have before I put any more up. So it's still taking me a while to work through it all. However, And here's the jar I keep in the kitchen. I'm going to have to refill it. So I'm going to open that jar there and top this off soon. So the thing about the mixed greens is that it is such an easy way to get greens of all varieties into your various dishes. Now, typically we're going to be talking about main dishes, anything that's got a more savory flavor. Not that you can't use that in something sweeter. I've never done it. I've never tried it. You can. I would just suggest being careful how much you put in there. And it's also going to depend on the kind of greens that go into your blend. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this as far as the blend. I prefer keeping it in little pieces, in flakes. And so this is something that I add to any main dish. It doesn't matter what kind of main dish it is. Even if I'm making hamburgers and I'm making the patties, I always make my own patties. I never buy pre-made patties. They're never great. They always have stuff in it you don't want. So I make my own patties and I throw a handful of the mixed greens into the bowl when I'm making up the mixture. I do the same thing with meatloaf, with meatballs. I add it to all of my different gravies, be it a gravy for biscuits and gravy or turkey gravy or like a chicken a la king or a turkey a la king, or the gravy that you make on Thanksgiving Day to go over your mashed potatoes. I add it to chili. I add it to soups. I add it to all of my Italian sausages. Well, that too. Italian sauces, whether it be for ravioli, spaghetti, pizza, or what am I leaving out? Lasagna. Those are the four main Italian dishes I make with a red sauce, and this goes into all of them. As long as I don't forget. I mean, sometimes I have a brain cramp and forget to add it, but most of the time, no, I don't forget. Most of the time, it goes into all of that. Even if I'm making some kind of bake where you're just throwing uh, like potatoes and carrots and some kind of meat in there, and I just throw in a handful of the mixed greens. Now, another way to make it sneakier that some people might prefer is to powder this same thing up and then add it. It'll be a lot more hidden that way. I don't like to powder it because then it's going to be more apt to turn whatever it is completely green. And I like seeing the little pieces in there myself, but that's me. I'm not trying to be that covert with the greens because I know they're there. And my grandkids, if I'm feeding something to them, they're not going to notice the difference because usually I'm putting in herbs for flavoring anyway, sage, thyme, and if it's something more Italian, it's going to be rosemary, basil, and oregano. So, the greens. Now let me talk. Again, this was my main focus was the greens, but I'm going to cover a few other things as well. So let me talk about the kind of things you can put into your greens blend or powder. Linda is one that likes to powder hers. And I mean, that's a great option. And the nice thing about that too is you can add it to smoothies as long as you don't go too heavy handed with it. Even if it's like a sweeter type smoothie, a fruit smoothie, you can add that in there and hide that in there. And the powder is going to be easier to hide in something like that. So, what do I put in there? Well, the number one green that goes in there is my stinging nettle. And the great thing about stinging nettle is that not only is it very highly nutritious, it is got such a mild flavor that you hardly notice it in anything. And there's a lot of your greens that you can do that with. I also like to add dandelion greens are another very important one in there. And there's like three main ones I really like to make sure I get in there. Well, maybe it's mostly those two. But then if you're growing root veggies such as carrots, rutabagas, beets, and turnips, these are all really great or sweet potatoes, not regular potatoes, but sweet potatoes. These are all some great greens that you can throw in there. So I dehydrate them up, by the way, dehydrate them up and then just flake them. So okay, so a few more would be things like, let's say you got a lot of excess kale, dehydrate up your kale. your cabbage, your collard greens, grape leaves. I put grape leaves in there. I try not one thing about grape leaves is they do tend to have a little bit of a tart flavor to them. So you might not want too many, just like the dandelion greens can have a bit of a bitter flavor. But the thing with the dandelion I noticed is that once they're dehydrated, some of that bitterness is mellowed out. And then when you're mixing it with these other greens, it you don't notice a bitterness when you're using it in your various foods. What else? Other berry leaves such as I don't even know if I said berry leaves yet, but strawberry leaves, raspberry leaves, blackberry leaves, I believe currants. I know blueberry leaves. I'm pretty sure currant leaves. I haven't looked into it, but I'm pretty sure they're edible too. Any of these can be added. Um, that are edible. Now you got calendula. There's another one. Calendula leaves are edible. That could be another green. I've added plantain in the past. Now I reserve my plantain for using for medicinal purposes, mostly for salves and whatnot. So that goes into I don't add that to my greens anymore. I've tried adding lamb's ear and that was okay, but it was too um it was too clumpy because of the fuzziness of it. It kept wanting to stick to itself, and so I stopped adding the lamb's ear to it. Let's see if I wrote down anything else that I might be forgetting because I am always adding whatever. I mean, whatever greens I have, there just are certain ones. Yeah, right, Deb. So a lot of your leaves from different fruit trees, even mango leaves are edible and good for you. So just make sure that if you're unsure, you've never heard anybody talk about it, just double check. I did a video years ago. Well, I've done a video on grape leaves. I've done a video on blackberry leaves, raspberry leaves, videos for each one of these. Strawberry leaves, they're all very nutritious. And then I was going to do something about mangoes and like the mango skins because people are like, you don't eat the mango skins, they're toxic. Well, that's not exactly true. A lot of people that live in places that grow mangoes can eat, they don't have, they'll eat the whole mango, skin and all. And the leaves are also edible. So I was doing a video because of the people wanting to debate me about the mango skins. And so I did some more research. And while I was at it, I thought, well, let's see if the leaves are edible too. Well, guess what? They are, and they're nutritious. So gorillas eat leaves. I'm not sure. Is that a question for me? I don't know who you're talking to. Lamb's quarter. Thank you. I knew I was leaving off something important. Lamb's quarter is another one that it appeared in my garden years ago. And I'm like, I think that's lamb's quarters. So I looked it up and sure enough it is. And that is another one that tends to go in my mixed greens when I'm getting plenty of it. So, and lamb's quarter is also one of those that is very nutritious. Some people like it in place of spinach, and it's got a far more mild flavor than even spinach has, and spinach is another green you can add in there. Um, I like it a little I like spinach, but I think I like the lamb's quarters better, and that's yes, another one I'm gonna put in there. Now, it's not that I don't use some of this stuff fresh and add it like, I'll put, dandelion leaves in my salads just so long as I don't get too many, and I'll use them fresh that way, and, yeah, as long as you don't get too many, because you can make your salad really bitter. If the whole salad is nothing but dandelion leaves, it might be a little bit bitter, but mix them in there, you won't notice, or will hardly notice. And then nettle, I do cook that up and use that as a side dish. Usually I'll mix it with something else, like add in some onions and some garlic, and then maybe even some other vegetables, but a lot of times just the nettle as a green and then the onions and garlic for flavor. And then just saute it up with a little bit of butter and some homemade wine. Really good. So my nettle is taking off right now. So I'm going to be doing that soon. Yes. And there's a lot of blossoms. Oh, something else that I don't know if you can see it in here that I started adding was you probably can't because I've already probably thinned out what was there. Daylily flowers, dehydrating those up and putting them in there. What I didn't eat fresh. I love them fresh. There's, that when that as soon as they bloom and they got that crunchiness right at the base of the leaf and they're kind of sweet. I love daylilies. But when I get a lot of them, I'll just start dehydrating them up and throwing them into my mixed greens because they're very good for you as well. Mullein leaves could be an option. I personally wouldn't do it because I would think the mullein leaves would behave similarly to the lamb's ear. Lamb's ear and mullein are not the same thing, but they grow in a similar fashion. They both have very fuzzy leaves. The lamb's ear leaves are softer. They have longer, softer hairs on them than the mullein does, but mullein leaves get bigger and they have a little bit different benefits from each other. And the lamb's ear gets the purple. The flowers are purple, where the mullein is typically yellow, but I think there's a pink one out there too. Daylily flowers. You can eat the leaves too, but the flowers. So I think if I remember correctly, the whole daylily plant is edible. I did a video on it. You can go to my other channel and just look up daylilies or daylily or daylily rain country if you're using the main YouTube search. And you should be able to find the video I did a few years ago on the benefits of daylily and the parts that are edible and usable and how I use them. So when it comes to the leaves, though, on the daylily, you want the real young ones. The old, as soon as they start getting bigger, they're just like real fibery and tough. So, yeah, I mean, whatever you've got growing, and I just love the fact that if you're growing those root vegetables I mentioned, like the sweet potatoes, the rutabaga, the beets, and the turnips, and the carrots, you can use those greens. They're all edible and they're so incredibly nutritious. Now, the only thing is the carrot greens do have kind of a stronger flavor. And so that would be something you may want to, not get too much of them in there, but they are very healthy. So, anyway, that's one way. And just add it to anything you want. I've even taken my mixed greens and I have a couple of videos on this and made a multivitamin slash mineral extract. I just never not never. I don't always remember to take it, but it's supposed to be a daily supplement. And I'll put in the mixed greens and then maybe some citrus peels to get the quercetin and the vitamin C out of that. And then whatever else, whatever I feel like throwing it in there, but the main thing being the greens that, you can do that in place of taking supplements. So I'm always looking for ways to avoid supplements. Like you wouldn't have to take I do like taking a B complex now and then, but really if you're getting your red meats along with all your other types of meats and fruits and vegetables, you shouldn't have to take a B complex. It's just that if you have a vegetarian diet or you're not eating any red meats, you're going to have a much harder time getting your B12. Well, I personally prefer red meats over any other kind. Now, not that I don't love chicken and turkey and salmon and cod every now and then, but red meats are my favorite, be it elk, venison, beef. And like I said, I still have yet to try moose I've tried bison in the form of a ground meat that I got from Misfits Market so I could try it. Was it Misfits? Maybe it was Butcher Box. Because for a while I was getting some of those meats from Misfits until I found Butcher Box. Now I get all my meats not all of my meats, all the ones I purchase. I'll put it that way. I get from Butcher Box. So, okay, now let me see something here. Yeah, any of your squash blossoms are tasty. They're yummy. Have I done the fried squash blossom? I've done the fried daylilies where you bread them and then fry them real fast. Those are pretty good. And then made a dip for them. I think I talk about it in that video on daylilies and their benefits and ways that you can use them. Anybody know EHST? Those tiny purple, what? I'm not sure what that means. Flowers that come up in the spring. Oh, are you talking about you're probably Lucy, I think you're talking about now I'm having a brain cramp. Violets. Tiny little purple flowers. They're very closely related to pansies. They are a type of the viola. They're in the viola family. So, well, yeah, there's also dead nettle, but you're saying tiny little purple flowers. I'm thinking you're probably talking about violets because they're some of the first violets, and dandelions are like the first flowers you start seeing. So, violets. There's purple dead nettle, which is a type of mint, but I don't think it gets flowers since it's a type of mint. My guess is it doesn't get flowers until much later in the season, where your violets, you get flowers right away, really early on. So that is my guess. Anyway, so yeah, I have violets. In fact, when I found violets growing in my yard, and I found that they did best where they didn't get a whole lot of direct sun, took those out and put them in pots on my deck that only gets really early morning sun. They do great in there. They do better than there. The leaves get bigger, the flowers get bigger than when I just leave them in the yard, especially if they're in a place that gets a lot more direct sun. I don't want to say a lot of direct sun since we don't get a lot of sun, period. But so yeah, that's so I actually intentionally grow them in pots for that reason because they get bigger, better, healthier, and I get more out of them that way. And they're in a place where they're going to stay cleaner too because they're in pots up on my deck, and so nobody's traipsing over them all the time. So okay, what did Tyler say now? My sister, what? Almost learned to play the violin. Very funny. Okay, so now let me talk about the next one. Now, if those of you who saw the short that I posted on my main channel, not here, I decided with the shorts I'm probably going to do, switch it up. Now that I've got this channel kind of at a point where I like it, I'm fine with it. I'd like to still see it grow, but I'd like to keep the shorts going out on both channels. So I did the short on my last batch. I did one a week ago on cinnamon rolls, and that was the orange almond cinnamon roll, the ones I make most commonly. And I thought, man, I want to make cinnamon rolls again, but I want to do something different. And I thought, apple cinnamon rolls, because I have lots of dehydrated apples and lots. Some of them go clear back to 2016 because I've been kept drying up apples and not working through them fast enough. And I have made apple powders before, and I'll use them. In fact, was it just the other day when Jace was here, I made apple pancakes and added my apple powder. So that's what this is right here. This is actually some I just powdered up because I used almost all that was in there. And I pulled down not a fresh jar, but another jar of just the dehydrated apple slices so I could take some out and soak them in juice in hot. I heated it up too so they would rehydrate. So that was, if you saw that short with the apple cinnamon rolls, that's what those are. I didn't just put them on there dry. I actually put them in juice and then put it on the wood stove to let it get nice and hot so that they would rehydrate, and they turned out really good. The juice, you could just do water. The juice just adds more flavor to them. And and for that one I used passion fruit juice. It was pretty dang tasty. But then I took the apple powder is what I used in the icing. So the icing was brown because of that. Kind of had a brown, plus it had cinnamon in it. So did the icing the way I normally do, where I've got powdered sugar. I used half and half. I put in a little bit of vanilla extract, but I used a lot. I'd say I used almost as much of the apple powder as I did the powdered sugar, and then some cinnamon. And so I put that on top, but the apples also I put a little bit of the apple powder into the dough as I was making the cinnamon rolls. And then when I went to fill them, you roll them out and then you put a lot of butter on there. And then you take your cinnamon sugar and you sprinkle it over the butter, right? Well, I put a whole bunch of apple powder into that as well. They turned out really good. They turned out super good. They didn't look to me as pretty as my orange almond cinnamon rolls look because the icing was brown. They were still really good. Patrick really seemed to enjoy them too. So I know I'm talking about sneaking in nutrition, but then I'm talking about cinnamon rolls. But still, it's you can sneak nutrition into desserts. Because here's the other thing with my cinnamon rolls is I also put in I use I use some home milled whole grain flour, the barley and the hard white wheat, though I do still do a blend of that, like a 50-50 blend of that, along with an organic unbleached white flour so I can get a nice fluffy, a fluffier bread out of it. But then I also add seeds to that. Now, I don't add the black seed because of the strong flavor that to me, I associate it more with a savory flavor. So when I'm doing cinnamon rolls, I don't put the black seeds in there, but I'll put in the chia seed, the flax seed, the poppy seeds, sometimes hemp seed, and I'll put that right at the beginning before I put the warmed water into the blend, to activate the yeast and let it sit. And so I'll let it soak for 15 minutes to a half an hour. Tiny bit of buffering. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say I do have a backup stream if we get cut off, and it is linked in the description box below this video. So I put reboot in the title whenever it's the reboot because I got cut off. But so far we've been doing good. Every time I've had the backup stream ready to go, I haven't needed it. I'm hoping that's the trick. Just always have a backup stream. But, anyway, so yeah, so you want to soak the seeds if they're whole or you wanna grind them. So that goes in the dough. So I'm getting that nutrition. There's lots of minerals in your seeds. Then, having the apple powder in the dough, in the middle of the cinnamon roll, and on top, now I'm getting the apples in there as well. And then, yes, powdered zucchini is another in any other squash. So pumpkin, zucchini, spaghetti squash, any squash is gonna have a mild enough flavor. It's gonna go very well with savory or sweet dishes. In fact, bringing that up, I was thinking this morning that the next batch of cinnamon rolls I make, I'm gonna make pumpkin cinnamon rolls with my pumpkin powder. I wanna try that. I wanna experiment with different now I've made raspberry rolls, but I don't call them cinnamon rolls because I didn't use cinnamon in those, but I have a recipe on that where I used, freeze-dried raspberries, powdered them up. But you know what I've learned about berries, by the way? You don't have to have freeze-dried when it comes to berries. Other fruits, apples you can get away with if they're a tart apple and that aren't really high in sugar. Any fruit that's not super high in sugar, you can get away with you can usually get away with powdering, and berries are great for that because when they dehydrate up, they have less sugar than like something like pineapple or mangoes, especially mangoes. That's why you can't get like you'd have to have freeze dried mangoes to get them to where you can powder them. But with berries, you don't even have to have freeze dried. You just dehydrate them and then you can powder those up and add them to anything. But yeah, anyway, I've done that with freeze-dried raspberries where I made the icing and the filling in there. I just didn't put cinnamon in there, so I couldn't call them cinnamon rolls. I just called them raspberry rolls, but made the same way as a cinnamon roll. But yes, zucchini, I have taken, I've got videos on this where I was calling it Z powder, and I was powdering up my dehydrated zucchini and adding it to different breads. Now it does because I don't peel my zucchini. I leave the peel on there. It does add a slight green hue to the pancakes. I've done this with pancakes, to the hamburger buns. Because I have a video on making hamburger buns, and in that video, I did actually add the Z powder to it, so they have a slight touch of green, but it's very light, just very light. And I've added it to just yeast breads, just regular, making a loaf bread. So zucchini powder is a great way to get more nutrition into your breads, and it does as long as you don't get too heavy-handed with replacing the zucchini powder with flour. You can have a nice. It'll make the bread nice and soft. I noticed that it does add a softness to the bread, but too much could make it heavy. So you got to be careful with that. And if you go watch the hamburger, it's on my other channel, the hamburger buns recipe. It's also hot dog buns. I do the same thing for hot dog buns. Um, you can see how much I added in there. I haven't done it in a while, so I don't remember. And usually, like if I'm doing pancakes or something, oh, this looks good. I'll just throw some in and mix it up. I don't usually measure that stuff. I just throw it in there. I do the same thing with the pumpkin powder, the apple powder when I'm making pancakes. Just throw in whatever sounds good, whatever looks good. So, yeah, and, but yeah, any of your squash powders. So, like I said, spaghetti squash, butternut squash, pumpkin, whatever your favorite squash is to grow. I've dehydrated spaghetti squash. Now, it's not gonna rehydrate the same way and be like a spaghetti type thing, but if you're just gonna powder it up, and you can either add water to it and, you know, eat it like just squash on the side, a nice soft squash, and with a little butter and salt or butter and brown sugar if that's what you prefer. That's what mom and I always used to have when, not always, but whenever mom would get acorn squash, she would cut them in half and then, take the seeds out and then fill it with butter and brown sugar. And then we'd have that as a side dish with their dinner. I always loved that. I haven't done that in a long time, but love that so much. But, yeah, anyway, your spaghetti squash, butternut squash, pumpkin squash powders can be rehydrated to use as that, to use as pie filling, or to add nutrition to any of these same kind of dishes like I'm bringing up. So, I did mention the seeds already, and you can add your seeds to it. They also have your omegas in them, your omega-3, your omega-6, and so you can add those seeds. Again, they should be either ground or soaked ahead of time to break them down so your body, so you can properly digest them and then get the benefits out of them, especially flaxseed because they have the harder shell, casing on the outside of them. But let's see, cookies, I said pancakes, breads of all kinds, muffins. If you make muffins, any of this stuff pretty much can be added to muffins or cookies or anything I'm bringing up. Another one is mushroom powder. So I prefer to use mushrooms. I'll dehydrate mushrooms a lot, but I prefer to use them whole. But I have taken some freeze dried mushrooms that I was trying out that I got from Mother Earth Products, but it depends on the mushroom. It doesn't have those also don't have to be freeze dried because just your standard mushroom that you'd buy in the little things in the store, the white mushroom, the brown mushroom, those will dehydrate up in a way that they are super easy to powder. And that if you have family members that don't like mushrooms or they don't like the texture, but they don't mind the flavor, making a mushroom powder can be a good way to get the nutrients that are in those mushrooms or even that flavor without that texture. Because that was my problem with mushrooms when I was a kid. I didn't mind them raw. I didn't mind the flavor, but I absolutely hated the texture of cooked mushrooms. It was the texture that got me as a kid. It took me a while. Once I got over the texture, I didn't mind. I love mushrooms now. But in fact, I don't remember how old I was when I realized I really liked mushrooms, no matter if they were cooked, raw, or whatever. I can handle them. But for those who don't, that have issues with the texture thing, and you want to get those nutrients, you want to get that flavor, dehydrating and powdering this stuff up is really good. So somebody was talking about using the powdered mushroom powder to make a cream of mushroom type soup, which I have a video on that, and that's the one where I was using the freeze dried mushrooms, powdering them up, and then making a cream of mushroom soup. Again, that would be something where if you didn't necessarily want pieces of mushrooms in there, the powder is a great way to go and a great way to hide that kind of thing. And mushrooms do have most of them, a mild enough flavor that even for those who hate the taste of mushroom, it can still be something you can mix in with your sauces and more so that they're still getting the great benefits of the mushrooms without having to deal so much with the flavor or the texture. All right, what else did I write down here? And I talk a lot about the citrus peel powder. In particular, we're talking um, any of the orange type fruits. So especially the ones with the thin skin, so you don't have to worry about the pith because the pith is hardly going to be noticeable, the bitterness of it. If you're getting the thinner skinned ones, such as your mandarins, your tangerines, your all those. There's so many clementines, all those. And